Welcome to a very special ranking video with the Nitpicking Nerds.
This is our list of the top 100 white cards in the entire Commander format. Now, obviously, it's a bit difficult to judge such wildly different cards, but we're using the following criteria.
Impact on the game.
Strength index it goes in.
Mana value.
Playability.
Castability.
Advantage gained when cast.
Card type.
Combo potential.
And compared to other cards in the color that do the same thing.
This list won't be taking budget or CDH into account.
Yeah, and for anything that we thought was a close call, it obviously came down to our personal preference.
Hope you enjoy. Number 100, Court of Grace. This card is a relative newcomer to Commander, having debuted in Commander Legends, released in 2020. It's part of a rare cycle of enchantments that make you the Monarch and provide you with a weak upkeep trigger that improves when you're the Monarch. Court of Grace is unique among these in that it's the only one to give you an evasive creature capable of reclaiming the monarchy. It's also a source of repeatable card draw in white, and all of that adds up to a solid mid-range token-making card. Number 99, Trove Warden. This card was printed in the Land's Wrath Precon that was released alongside Zendikar Rising in 2020. It was one of only 3 new cards printed exclusively for this Commander product. As long as you play a land after deploying Trove Warden, you are all but guaranteed to get value. One of the strongest things about this card is that no one at the table will want to kill it, since when it dies, it gets you some nice value. But the longer it stays on the battlefield, the more value it can accrue for the dies trigger. It also works extremely well with fetch lands. Add a sack outlet like High Market to the mix, and you're looking at some serious value when you decide to sacrifice this kitty. Number 98, Reconnaissance. Reconnaissance was released in 1998 in the set Exodus. This card offers an extremely unique effect that you simply can't get anywhere else. Send in all your attackers to get attack triggers or push through damage, and then remove them from combat before they die. This card also gives your creatures pseudo-vigilance, because after damage at the end of the combat step, you can remove your attackers from combat and untap them. This card is no joke, and when you factor in its uniqueness, it's easy to see why it cracked the top 100 best white cards in Commander. Number 97, Ephemerate. This card was introduced in Modern Horizons, a set designed to print cards directly into Modern, released in 2019. Ephemerate is a card that really only goes in Flicker decks because you want to make sure that you're always targeting a creature with an enters the battlefield ability. It isn't very flashy, but earns a spot in the top 100 due to its pure efficiency. Getting to retrigger ETBs twice for 1 mana is something that no other card can match. You also get to mix and match your targets, since you can choose a different creature to flicker when you rebound it. If you ever get to save a creature from a removal spell and get an ETB, you feel like you're cheating. Number 96, Moat. Moat only has 1 printing, and it's in the 1994 set Legends. The current price tag on Moat is over $1,200. This is mostly a symptom of Moat being on the reserve list, a list of cards that will never be reprinted, in order to preserve their value on the secondary market. The main thing keeping Moat from being higher on this list is that you just can't throw it into any deck, as it has a symmetrical effect that will shut down your attackers as well as your opponents. Where this card really shines is in control decks that have no interest in attacking, where it buys you time to set up and put yourself in a position to dominate the game. By the time the other players come up with an answer for Moat, you will have an answer for their answer. Number 95, Arena Rector. Arena Rector was printed first in the 2018 two-headed giant focus set, Battlebond. Her strength lies in her ability to cheat out high-cost, high-power planeswalkers. This strength does come with a drawback, as her power can only mirror the top planeswalkers in the format, which are currently Ugin the Spirit Dragon, Nicol Bolas God Pharaoh, and Liliana Dreadhorde General, plus a few more. Moving forward, Arena Rector can only get more powerful, because with each new set comes a chance of getting a new awesome planeswalker for her to cheat out. Number 94, Darksteel Mutation. Darksteel Mutation is designed for one thing, neutralizing commanders, and was introduced in Commander 2013 for just that purpose. Sometimes killing a commander can feel pointless, as it can just be recast next turn, but with Darksteel Mutation, you can lock a commander onto the battlefield with no abilities, which can really put a wrench in anyone's plans. Most decks are built around their commanders and are crippled by an effect like this one. The problem with this card is that if you're not answering a commander, then the card is extremely outclassed as a removal spell, which will become very obvious as we climb higher and higher on this list. Number 93, Cosmic Intervention. Cosmic Intervention comes to us from the Kaldheim Commander Precon Phantom Premonition. This card provides you with an awesome response to board wipes, and actually has other corner case uses as well. It plays great with fetch lands to function as a pseudo rampant growth, works with mass land destruction to win the game on the spot, and functions as a passable defense against spot removal. Add those abilities up, and you get one of the best versions of this effect we've ever seen. That being said, there are 4 better mass board wipe protection spells remaining on this list. Number 92, Avacyn Angel of Hope. She was printed in 2012 in the aptly named set Avacyn Restored. She's a strong, splashy effect that combines well with board wipes to lead you to a swift victory. However, her hefty mana cost of 8 is sometimes hard to justify, especially since she still gets swept into exile, can be sacrificed, and can't survive many of the better board wipes in the format. As a result, Avacyn will have to settle for hanging out in the 90s. But just like with Cosmic Intervention, if you can resolve any mass land destruction spell with her on the field, it will be GG. Number 91, Elspeth Sun's Champion. Elspeth's Son's Champion, or ESC as we will call her as of this video, is the marquee card from the original Theros set, released in 2013. Honestly, ESC is a card we feel is very overrated here at the Nitpicking Nerds, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have its strengths. Her +1 provides a steady stream of tokens that make protecting her actually possible, and her minus is a decent but awkward board wipe for the beefy monsters at the table. ESC is currently in 6% of all decks that could play her, according to EDHREC, and that staggeringly high number is what leads us to believe that the community as a whole grades her differently than we do. She can do work, but she's still a 6-mana planeswalker. Number 90, Giant Killer. 2019's Throne of Eldraine gave us dozens of staples across every single format. Because of the high power of the set, cards like Giant Killer slid under the radar. On paper, it looks like an overcosted removal spell stapled to a creature that you would never play in Commander. Actually, all that is completely true, but if you care about and can utilize the creature side, such as in a God Eternal Oketra deck, then having the removal spell attached is a huge bonus. Combine Giant Killer with Ranger of EOS and Ranger Captain of EOS, and you get a nice tool for your toolbox deck. And all of a sudden, your deck starts gaining access to removal without having to compromise its creature count. Number 89, Winds of Abandon. Winds of Abandon is the second card on this list from 2019's Modern Horizons. This card suffers from a few issues. It's a sorcery, it ramps the opponents, and it's a bit overcosted on both sides, but the fact that this card is both an okay removal spell and a good one-sided wipe really pushes it up to this spot on our list. Opponents have a single threat in play, answered for 2 mana. Opponents have 2,769 nice threats in play, answered for 6 mana. Is there any board state this spell can't answer? Honestly, not really. Number 88, Steelshapers Gift. Steelshapers Gift was printed in 5th Dawn, the conclusion to the original Mirrodin block back in 2004. Tutors are extremely strong in Commander, and the cheaper the mana cost, the stronger they become, by a wide margin. This is as cheap as it gets, but at the cost of being extremely narrow and only fetching equipment. That means you need to be in a deck that will constantly want access to new or specific equipment in order to make Steelshapers Gift really shine. In all honesty, the specificity of this card might be too high for it to crack the list. If it wasn't for Skullclamp existing, Skullclamp is so ludicrously powerful that it brought a card that can find it into the top 100 white cards. Number 87, Decree of Justice. This card was first printed in Scourge during 2003. Pay no attention to the actual mana cost of this card, which offers a terrible rate on 4/4 Angels. We're interested in the cycling ability, which gives us an uncounterable instant speed token maker. The ratio of mana spent to tokens made isn't the best, but you get your card back, which makes Decree of Justice one of the best one-shot creature makers to fire off at the end of someone's turn. Plus, if you don't need it, just cycle it for 3 mana and dig deeper into your deck. Number 86, Sugiri Shelter / Sugiri Glacier. Sugiri Shelter and all of the other MDFC lands decided to grace us with their presence amidst Zendikar Rising in 2020. This group of cards changed how Commander decks would be built from then on. The front side of Sugiri Shelter alone is bad, and the back side alone is bad, but when combined, you get a versatile card that is never dead and that can replace a land during deck building. It'll ensure you hit your land drops early, and in the late game when you don't want lands, it's a nice protection spell that can negate a piece of spot removal or push through some critical damage. The real key to these cards is that they are lands on the flip side, and you can be sure you'll see more in this top 100. Yep, they're that good. Number 85, Archangel Lathoon. This lifelinking angel premiered alongside M14 in 2013 and has been a beloved life gain payoff ever since. This is what a life gain payoff looks like in Commander. It buffs your entire team with each instance of life gain, so the Archangel is best friends with all the Soul Wardens and works even better with Spike Feeder because the two go infinite together, gaining you infinite life and buffing your creatures endlessly. Her niche usage is what keeps her from ranking higher on this list, but Archangel Lathoon is a stellar life gain card that can compete at most power levels. Number 84, Giver of Runes. In 2019, Modern Horizons brought us Giver of Runes, better known as Stepmother of Runes. The two cards are very similar, with the notable difference between the two being that Giver cannot protect itself, but she does have the small upside of also granting protection from colorless. Either way, Stepmom is a cheap flag bearer that will protect your biggest threats from spot removal and damage-based board wipes. Certain decks will play her if she can have a cantrip-like effect when cast, replacing herself on the cheap while providing some annoying protection. Otherwise, be sure your commander packs a serious punch before sleeving her up. She doesn't go in every deck. Number 83, Monastery Mentor. Looking to make some tokens? In 2015, Fate Reforged delivered Monastery Mentor for just that purpose. While it's certainly better in 1v1 formats, it can still do some excellent work if you surround him with non-creature spells. Do that, and not only is the Mentor an army in a can, but he also goes to the trouble of pumping all the monks for you. You might want a haste enabler to take maximum advantage of storming off with monks, but even without an explosive turn, Monastery Mentor can provide a steady stream of tokens for any go-wide deck. Number 82, Teleportation Circle. Do you remember D&D Adventures in the Forgotten Realms way back in 2021? Well, that set had Teleportation Circle in it, and it turns out it's a pretty darn good card in the right deck. You're going to want to flicker a creature each turn so that this card basically draws you a card, or more, every turn. The good news is, that isn't very hard to do. Just jam this into a flicker deck and know that it even hits artifacts, which means it can untap your mana rocks too. We like this card a lot more than the similar but distinctly worse Conjurer's Closet, which is a card we rarely turn to in EDH. Shaving a mana and adding a card type definitely pushes this effect into the realm of playability. Number 81, Rule of Law. Mirrodin came out in 2003 and brought Rule of Law with it. Rule of Law and other effects like it are deceptively annoying in Commander. Most people don't notice just how good they are until they play against it for the first time. Double spelling is a critical part of winning Commander games, and the player deploying Rule of Law can simply unload their hand and then play it, or jam a truckload of instants into their deck so that they're always taking advantage and progressing their game plan while their opponents are stifled beyond belief. This fits nicely into stacks decks, control decks, or any deck trying to be super disruptive, honestly. Rule of Law is good. Number 80, Ajani, Strength of the Pride. In 2019, Core 2020 brought us a stellar life gain Planeswalker in the form of Ajani. The real power in this Planeswalker comes from his Zero ability, which is a one-sided board wipe. However, it requires you to be at 55 life or higher to activate, a feat only dedicated life gain decks should attempt to pull off. If it's safe, deploy him and start building up your life total, but if not, you can pair him with a huge surge of life gain to absolutely wreck your opponents. He's a unique Planeswalker because his game-winning ultimate is tied to your life total and not his loyalty, so even if he gets smacked, you can still knock your opponents back into the Stone Age. Number 79, Bassys Lieutenant. This card originates from Core Set 2021, released in 2020, and seems to have been generally overlooked. In dedicated +1/+1 counters decks, it protects your team from board wipes and works extremely well in tandem with sack outlets. In fact, if you have a way to repeatedly place counters on your creatures, like with Cathars Crusade or Good Fortune Unicorn, you can sacrifice creatures infinitely and assemble combo kills. He even dodges certain spot removal spells and can effectively block due to his protection from multicolored. Overall, this is a super efficient +1/+1 counters card. Number 78, Oryak Champion. Here's our third card in a row that is primarily good for one archetype, released in 2004 as a part of 5th Dawn. It's a slightly overcosted Soul Sister with some built-in protection against 40% of the colors in Magic, which is nice to have. As it happens, Magic barely has any creatures that gain you life whenever another creature enters, so these precious few are in high demand for life gain decks. When played early, Oryak Champion can be good for 20 or more life, which is a ludicrous amount for just 2 mana. It can also help recuperate life lost from powerful spells like Command the Dreadhorde, Bolas' Citadel, and Necropotence. Number 77, Suture Priest. The evil Soul Sister. This card from New Phyrexia in 2011 combines 2 very useful abilities and is extremely annoying in the hands of life gain decks. It'll sit around and gain you life when creatures enter on your side, but creatures played by your opponents slowly chip away at their life total in an inconspicuous fashion that usually allows Suture Priest to overstay its welcome at the table and dish out lots of damage over time. A bonus side effect of this card is that it prevents certain types of infinite loops from your opponents, like with Food Chain and Nim Deathmantle. Never ignore a Suture Priest. Number 76, Secure the Wastes. Ever since Secure the Waste showed up in Dragons of Tarkir in 2015, it has been the poster child for Army in a Can token makers. At instant speed, you can turn all your mana into warriors and surprise opponents with attackers they didn't even see coming. It's especially backbreaking if you can untap and slam a pump effect like Elesh Norn or Craterhoof Behemoth, which is why you always respect the token player who passes the turn with a ton of open mana. Number 75, Stoneheart Giant. We were introduced to Stoneheart Giant in 2008 with Morningtide, and the toolbox of awesome equipment he provides access to only gets larger as more spicy equipment are released. The main downside of this card is that it's clunky. A 5-mana creature you need to untap with isn't going to break the format, but if you can offset this by granting haste to the Giant or by untapping him, he'll pay you back handsomely by cheating your best equipment from your deck into play and equipping it for free. Just make sure your deck has enough good equipment and Stoneheart Giant will do the rest. Number 74, God Eternal Oketra. Oketra is one of 4 zombified gods from War of the Spark, which came out in 2019. Reading this card for the first time was super fun because you kept looking for the downside and it never comes. It's really hard to effectively answer God Eternal Oketra, and she's a decently sized beater that spits out 4/4s whenever you cast a creature. The one thing holding this card back is its heavy reliance on creatures. You'll need a very high creature count for Oketra, but in white, that isn't very difficult at all. Toss in things like White Mane Lion and Cloudstone Curio and your opponents will be drowning in 4/4 zombies. Number 73, Eerie Interlude. This card shines in any deck looking to protect non-token creatures or proactively trigger ETBs, and most of the time, those 2 goals work hand in hand for Blink decks. Eerie Interlude has been a mainstay of both budget and non-budget Flicker decks since its debut in Shadows over Innistrad in 2016, because it'll save your creatures from any style of board wipe. Making your team indestructible is solid, but this spell circumvents Cyclonic Rift, Toxic Deluge, and Tragic Arrogance, all while advancing your game plan and providing you with tons of card advantage if your creatures have ETBs. Number 72, Land Tax. This is one of the oldest cards on the list, having made its first appearance in Legends all the way back in 1994, when I was -3 years old. Land Tax tends to be great in the early game and pretty bad in the late game when land drops aren't as important. It's also very awkward in your opening hand if you happen to be going first. It starts pulling its weight more when you have consistent access to looting effects or can somehow take advantage of those extra lands in hand each turn. It's also worth noting that Land Tax isn't very good at all in green decks, so save it for your base white decks where it'll help you hit those precious land drops. Number 71, Unexpectedly Absent. This is a spicy little removal spell that has a lot of play to it, first showing up in the Commander 2013 precons. It's a bit overcosted for a single target removal spell and usually won't make the cut when you have access to black spells. But what this card lacks in efficiency is made up for with its versatility. You can target any non-land permanent and can sink as much mana as you want into the spell to keep the threat off your back for longer. It even gets around indestructibility. One of my favorite moves is to hold up white, pass the turn, and tuck the biggest threat in response to a shuffle effect. It doesn't get much more satisfying than that. Number 70, Linvala, Keeper of Silence. Linvala has been shushing creatures ever since Rise of the Eldrazi in 2010. Unlike similar hate bear effects, Linvala shuts down mana abilities, so not even mana dorks are useful while she's in play. She's also non-symmetrical, so activate all the abilities you want. Linvala is obviously better against creature decks and can be a liability against control, so we won't put her any higher than number 70, but this is a solid and annoying card that can really lock down a game under the right circumstances, and it's a good resource to have in your toolbox. Number 69, nice, Robe of Stars. Robe of Stars was just printed in the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms precon decks earlier this year in 2021, and it's one of the best equipment the format has seen in a long time. Once you cast and equip this to a creature, the creature is essentially unstoppable for the rest of the game. A common play pattern that works very well with Robe of Stars is to attack with the equipped creature or get value from it on your turn, then spend your first mana to proactively phase it out. Nobody in their right mind will respond when you're holding up so much mana, meaning your key creature is untouchable. This card can be a bit mana intensive to use repeatedly, but can absolutely turn the tide of a game in your favor. This will be a common tutor target for equipment decks going forward. Number 68, Mother of Runes. From 1999 all the way back to Urza's Legacy, we arrive at Mother of Runes. It's very similar to the newer Giver of Runes, but ranks 16 spots higher on the list because of the tiny difference that allows Mother of Runes to target itself. This means no getting around your spot removal protection. If they want to kill a threat or your Mother of Runes, your opponent will have to waste at least one removal spell, which is fantastic because nobody wants to do that. Like with Giver, Mom can also go on the offensive and help push through damage against single-color board states. She'll spend most of her time sitting around untapped because the threat of activation is just so powerful. Number 67, Brought Back. An efficient instant that comes to us from Magic 2020, released in 2019, Brought Back is a potent trick that's easy to hold up and one that can be used either offensively or defensively. It works especially well with sacrifice outlets and fetch lands, letting you re-trigger your best creature abilities or even ramp during your turn, and when used post-board wipe, it brings back your two best permanents, putting you way ahead of the rest of the table. The versatility and power of this card should not be overlooked, especially in white or Boros decks where ramp is hard to come by. Number 66, Benevolent Offering. Commander 2014 gave us a cycle of spells that give solid bonuses to their casters and hand out the same bonuses to opponents. Benevolent Offering stands head and shoulders above the rest of this cycle. It provides instant speed board presence and a nice burst of life gain, guaranteed to be at least 6 from the spirits you'll get. This card has political value since you're giving away spirits and life gain, but also works really well when used selfishly. Just give the life away to the person who controls the fewest creatures and give spirits to someone who can't use them very well. It stands out as one of the most playable ways to gain lots of life in a single turn. It also works wonders in a token or flying matters deck. Number 65, Knight of the White Orchid. This card has been a white commander's staple since its release in the 2008 set Shards of Alara. As with most white ramp, this card requires you to have less lands in play than an opponent, so you will most likely have to go 2nd, 3rd, or 4th and wait until turn 3 to get the Knight's effect. The things that take this card from good to great are that the land comes into play untapped, effectively making Knight cost only 1 mana, and that you can get non-basic planes such as shock lands and triomes, making this card not only ramp, but fixing as well. Number 64, Elidar Guardian. 2017's Aether Revolt quickly ruined Standard with the powerhouse that is Elidar Guardian. It was the second part of the infamous Saheeli Cat combo, a 2-card combo that could win the game on turn 4. For Commander players, this cat is very fair and feels a little clunky at 4 mana. Where it makes up for its mana cost is with versatility. Not many cards both blink any permanent you control and return them to the battlefield right away. Because of that, this card pretty much goes infinite with a ham sandwich. Any clone gives you infinite ETB triggers, Amanatu also gives you infinite ETB triggers, so just add a payoff like Corpse Knight and boom, you win the game. In Flicker decks, this will function as a cantrip early and a win condition late. Number 63, Grand Abolisher. Grand Abolisher has been protecting CDH combos since 2011 with the release of Magic 2012. If you cast this spell on your turn, it will demand to be countered, since once it resolves, your opponents will not be able to interact for the rest of your turn. This makes Grand Abolisher great at protecting combos, preventing counterspells, and allowing you to make big moves without worry. This card is really a one-trick pony, but he does the trick so well that he's the 63rd best white card ever printed. Number 62, Path to Exile. Unconditional creature removal at 1 mana is incredibly strong. So strong that you may be asking, nerds, how is this not higher on the list? Well, in 2009, Conflux gave us Path to Exile, which you might have thought was the pinnacle of white removal had you never heard of Swords to Plowshares, a card you'll see much higher on this list. Path to Exile is great, but it plays second fiddle to Swords. If you need a second Swords, then Path is great, as it will provide you with virtually the same effect with noticeably more downside. Giving away lands to your opponents is not something you can do too often. The one cool thing that Path can provide you that Swords cannot is the ability to ramp yourself by pathing your own token or creature that's about to die anyway. Number 61, Anointed Procession. This card was released in Amonkhet in 2017 and is a color-shifted Parallel Lives. This card only fits in exactly token decks, but in those decks you will hope to draw Anointed Procession every game. This card doubles your token output, making it extremely easy to overrun the board with small or large tokens and KO your opponents. In this instance, it's well worth the 4 mana setup cost to supercharge every play you make for the rest of the game. Number 60, Aven Mindcensor. Future Sight, released in 2007, was a time of experimentation at Wizards of the Coast. Aven Mindcensor was one such experiment. In Commander, search effects are everywhere, from mana ramp to tutors to fetch lands, meaning that Mindcensor will have an impact on almost every game. It has flash, so you often get to respond to a search with this card and catch someone off guard. If nobody searches, just flash it in anyway and have an annoying hate bear that can get in for some chip damage. Number 59, To Inversion. This is the second MDFC land from 2020's Zendikar Rising to make this list so far. This card looks absolutely awful on paper, since this is an effect you can get for much less mana in the form of Hour of Revelation, Planar Cleansing, and Devastating Mastery. However, much like Sugiri Shelter, all of this card's strength comes from the fact that it's going to take a land slot in your deck. 90% of the time, this is a tap land, but 10% of the time, it's the board wipe that saves you and the rest of the table from imminent doom. And since this goes in a land slot, you can still play those other board wipes if you want to. Number 58, Day of Judgment. Hey, 2 board wipes in a row. This one comes from Zendikar, released in 2009. Day of Judgment is nothing flashy, but it gets the job done. Paying 4 mana to destroy all creatures will net you lots of card advantage, but also crucially allow you to deploy threats afterwards and take full control of the game. However, this is not a card many decks end up playing, primarily because of the existence of... Number 57, Wrath of God. This is the OG board wipe from Alpha in '93. It is a strictly better Day of Judgment, basically because it also kills Thrun the Last Troll and other regenerate creatures. Unlike the difference between Swords and Path, Day of Judgment and Wrath sit next to each other on this list because the difference is so marginal, it will barely ever come up. Decks don't usually need to play a ton of board wipes, so Day of Judgment and even Wrath of God get left on the sidelines quite often, but their power is still very high overall. Number 56, Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant. From 1998's Exodus and 2010's Rise of the Eldrazi respectively, these so-called Soul Sisters are some of, if not the best sources of repeatable life gain. Creatures enter the battlefield essentially every single turn in Commander, which will allow you to gain 10 to 20 life over the course of a game easily, even if you play this on a later turn. These cards are mainly just for life gain decks that can take advantage of the triggers in some way, but in lower power attack metas, any deck can use the amount of life gained by the Sisters. They occupy the same slot on this list because they share essentially the exact same text box. Number 55, Ethersworn Cannonist. Ethersworn Cannonist has been a thorn in the side of any deck looking to double spell since Shards of Alara in 2008. Having this effect on a creature is very nice, as it lets you keep your creature count up while still playing a stack style of game. Where Ethersworn Cannonist really shines is in a heavy artifact deck, because the effect becomes non-symmetrical. Being an artifact and a creature makes it extremely easy to tutor for as well. With that strength comes the slight weakness of being easier to remove. More types on a card means it's susceptible to more removal spells. But if you're looking to slow opponents down, look no further than Ethersworn Cannonist. Number 54, Deafening Silence. This is Throne of Eldraine's take on Ethersworn Cannonist from 2019, except it's an enchantment and stops non-creatures. This card tends to go up in value the more competitive your game gets, as the reliance on creatures at the table goes down. Deafening Silence obviously slots much better into a heavy creature deck, which allows you to easily break the symmetry while absolutely shutting down any spell-slinging deck, or deck that needs to be able to cast multiple non-creature spells in a turn to stay ahead. Number 53, Hallowed Spirit Keeper. Commander 2014 brought us this criminally underplayed token maker. In order to take advantage of the Spirit Keeper, you'll need a very high creature count. Once that condition is met, this card becomes an absolute house. Early game, it'll die into 1 to 5 spirits that can deal some nice chip damage or serve as chump blockers, and late game, it can die into upward of 15 spirits and be the catalyst to you winning the game. It's practically begging to be reanimated or paired with Ashnod's Altar. It's time for people to stop sleeping on Hallowed Spirit Keeper, because it truly earned its spot on this list. Number 52, Austere Command. Austere Command is part of the original command cycle from Lorwyn, printed first in 2007. As just a creature board wipe, it's way overcosted. However, the additional 2 modes on it add enough versatility to more than make up for this fact. Each individual pair might seem underpowered, but when one spell gives you 6 choices on how to wipe the board, you get a card that can get you out of almost any sticky situation. Plus, if your deck contains mostly cheap or expensive creatures, Austere Command can function as a one-sided wipe. When a player starts to take over a game with pesky artifacts and enchantments, you'll be happy to have this over Wrath of God. Number 51, Yosei the Morning Star. Moving on from one cycle to another, our rank number 51 belongs to the Spirit Dragon cycle from 2004's Champions of Kamigawa. Yosei the Morningstar is only in 2,543 decks, but I'm guessing that's because he's absolutely miserable to play against. He virtually makes an opponent lose an entire turn when he dies. When combined with sack outlets and recursion, you get the ability to soft lock players out of the game, often leading to a slow and painful victory or a quick concession. If your opponents can't find a fast way to exile Yosei, you'll get to hold them hostage and pick them off one at a time. Number 50, Mangara the Diplomat. Core Set 2021 was surprisingly powerful for a core set, giving us great commander reprints and new staples like Mangara in 2020. Mangara is pretty much guaranteed to draw you cards as long as he's on the battlefield, since double spelling is a critical part of commander for almost every deck. If players are not double spelling to avoid giving you cards, then he's acting like a powerful stacks effect. As a less important side bonus, he also tends to prevent random attackers from coming at you, since nobody wants to hand out free cards to their opponents. So either your opponents draw you cards or tax themselves, and that's a win-win for the Mangara player. Number 49, Archeomancers Map. This map is the third card from this year to make the list, and it comes from the Commander 2021 product. Archeomancer's Map fits really well into non-green decks containing a decent number of planes. It spots you 2 lands right away, so you'll have some to drop in when your opponents start ramping. Another upside is that this card's artifact typing allows for it to have extra synergies with certain archetypes. Map's ability to both find the lands and put them into play make this card a white staple and rare source of actual land ramp in the color. Number 48, Draconid Magistrate. This card was printed in 2020's Ikoria as an answer to the companions printed in the same set. Then, they changed the companion rule, rendering Draconid Magistrate useless against them, but it's still a house in Commander, because it stops people from playing their commanders. This card has only 2 mana, meaning if it's in your opening hand, you'll be locking other commanders in the command zone until he's removed. As a bonus to his main use, he also shuts down Cascade, Flashback, Impulse Draw, and many other mechanics. And don't forget, this isn't symmetrical. All your spells are still fair game. Number 47, Arkan of Ameria. Here we have yet another card from Zendikar Rising in 2020. This card's first line of text may look familiar as we've had 2 similar cards already on the list in Ethersworn Cannonist and Deafening Silence. Unlike those cards, this one has no type restriction, so all players will be single spelling each turn. If your deck has lots of instant speed spells, this card becomes much stronger. As a bonus to the first line of text, the Arkan also causes opposing non-basics to enter tapped, slowing down your opponents even further. If you can flood the board before landing this, you'll be in a great position. Number 46, Cathars Crusade. Cathars Crusade is legitimately one of the best finishers for a +1/+1 counter deck in the format, originating from Avacyn Restored in 2012. It demands to be answered quickly, because if it stays on the field for even 1 turn cycle, you most likely will be able to generate between 10 and 30 power, leading to a horrifically large Alpha Strike. This, combined with the fact that you can go infinite with cards like Bassys Lieutenant and Gave Guru of Spores, makes this the 46th best white card of all time. Number 45, Rest in Peace. 2012's Return to Ravnica marks the first appearance of this disruptive hate piece. Rest in Peace is a card with an extremely simple design. It just says, bye-bye graveyards. Almost all decks use the graveyard in some way or another, whether it be reanimation effects, regrowths, flashback, or something else. Rest in Peace will negatively impact almost every commander deck ever built. Though most decks will feel the sting of a Rest in Peace, a graveyard deck can straight up fold to this card if it isn't answered. Just make sure it isn't going to disrupt your own plans very much, and you'll be presenting a serious roadblock for everyone else. Number 44, Eldrazi Displacer. Oath of the Gatewatch marked the inception of the colorless mana symbol in 2016. Eldrazi Displacer is great for any flicker deck that can afford to pay enough colorless sources to satiate its thirst for wingdings, and that actually isn't difficult to pull off. Jump through that small hoop and this card becomes a must-answer threat, converting every 3 mana you have into an ETB trigger, protection for spot removal, token removal, or a way to tap down scary attackers. With a strong enough board state of enters the battlefield creatures, this card can soft lock players from attacking or even casting spells, continually advancing your board state without spending additional cards. Number 43, Kabira Takedown. Oh look, another MDFC from Zendikar Rising in 2020. This one is essentially a Doomblade out of a creature deck, but keep in mind that's because it's in a land slot. Doomblade is terrible when it takes up a spell slot and can never turn into a different card. Next to Balagad Recovery, this is probably the second best uncommon MDFC, and we play it even in our higher power decks, and we'd recommend you do the same. Number 42, Guardian of Faith. It's hard to believe that the incredibly meh set of Adventures in the Forgotten Realms from 2021 is giving us our second card on the list, but here we are. Guardian of Faith is a new and interesting take on the board-wide protection as a flash creature. Anytime a creature-based deck can replace a non-creature spell with a creature, it gets that much stronger and more synergistic. Reanimating this, or in some cases flickering it, will give your opponents headaches. There's no removing a phased-out creature, and having your token and non-token creatures survive until your next turn, guaranteed can warp an entire game in your favor. Number 41, Fiend Hunter. We here at the Nitpicking Nerds strongly advise against almost all Oblivion Ring type effects, but Fiend Hunter from Innistrad in 2011 is a stupidly strong exception to this rule. His exile and return triggers are separate, so sacrificing him in response to the exile trigger will get rid of the threat permanently. On top of that, Fiend Hunter also has the ability to target your creatures with his ability, allowing you to combo off with things like Sun Titan, Angel of Glory's Rise, and Karmic Guide. It's funny how changing this card's text slightly makes it completely unplayable. Number 40, Hushbringer. Here comes another overperformer from 2019's Throne of Eldraine. Shutting down ETB abilities on a 2-mana lifelink flyer would be a solid card already, but Hushbringer stops death triggers too. It can sometimes be hard to slot this into a deck, since so many take advantage of one of those 2 types of triggers. However, once you get this into a deck, that means you're hosing a lot of strategies, and for just 2 mana. Good luck to any Marin players who face down this card. Number 39, Cataclysm. Yep, land destruction. Cataclysm may be the most underplayed card in all of Commander because it's basically soft banned. It's a board wipe for all permanent types for only 4 mana from Exodus back in 1998. Sure, everyone gets to keep their very best permanent, but you control when to cast this and can ensure you'll have the best board state after it resolves. A deck such as Rafik of the Many would quickly close out a game post-Cataclysm, and there are plenty of commanders like him. Plus, if you're firing off Cataclysm on turn 4 or sooner, nobody will have much of anything, and you can leverage fast mana to stay way ahead. Cataclysm can also essentially win you the game on the spot with Teferi's Protection. I wonder if we'll see that card later on this list. Number 38, Stony Silence. Much like Rest in Peace, this is a 1 and a white enchantment that negatively impacts most decks and absolutely hoses specific strategies. This one comes to us from Innistrad in 2011. Virtually all non-green decks rely on artifacts for ramp, among other things. So really, the only requirement to make Stony Silence fantastic is to just play very few artifacts. Green-white decks love this, and any form of Enchantress deck can play it with ease. They won't even notice it's there. Number 37, Aura of Silence. This is an awesome stacks piece that doubles as removal, first printed in Weatherlight in 1997, the year I was born. Paying 2 more mana for artifacts and enchantments will either completely deter opponents from playing them, or prevent them from casting multiple spells per turn. And if they do pay the tax and cast a splashy spell like Doubling Season, you just sack Aura of Silence and kill it for a gigantic tempo swing. This tax piece often demands an answer, but as soon as a player goes to remove it, he'll just blow up their best artifact or enchantment and get a 2-for-1, along with all the value the static ability has gotten you up to this point. Seriously, if you aren't playing this card, give it a try. Number 36, Ranger of EOS. Ranger is card advantage in white, which was almost completely unheard of in 2008 when Shards of Alara released. Ranger of EOS' strength comes from the cards it can fetch, because without good targets, this card is just a poopy 4-mana 3/2. Even just in white, it has plenty of effective targets, like Mom and Stepmom, the Soul Sisters, Hagerback Walker, Giant Killer, Sarah Ascendant, Thraben Inspector, Mikaeus the Lunarch, Walking Ballista, and Esper Sentinel. With so many strong options, this card is an absolute Swiss Army knife in creature-heavy decks. Our next card is Hour of Revelation, which comes from 2017's Hour of Devastation. In Commander, the board is almost always home to an infestation. That means this card will cost white, white, white on most occasions. 3-mana Planar Cleansing exceeds all board wipe expectations, and works even better for slow decks looking to control creature population. Costing triple white is something your mana base needs to take into consideration, but if you can cast it in most situations, your opponents will be ready for resignation. Number 34, Remorseful Cleric. Remorseful Cleric is the first of 2 2/1 spirit creatures that cost 1 and a white, fly, and sacrifice themselves for an effect on this list. It originates from Core Set 2019, which released in 2018. Similar to Aura of Silence, it deters players from messing with their graveyards just by existing, but if they go to kill it or do something especially busted, Remorseful Cleric will just mess them up by sacrificing himself. Even the floor of this card is a 2-mana Bajuka Bog effect, which is a pretty decent worst-case scenario. It's also a creature, so it can be tutored easily and reanimated for multiple uses. Number 33, Flawless Maneuver. Commander 2020's free spell cycle was pretty broken. All you have to do to cast this card for free is control your commander, so if you can build a decent board state and your commander isn't more than 5 mana, this is basically an auto-include. If you tap out and pass the turn, players may feel safe playing a Wrath, but you'll be ready for the absolute blowout with Flawless Maneuver. The best part is, even if they know you're playing this card, they can't afford to play around it. What are they supposed to do? Not wipe the board? You keep the creatures either way. Number 32, Replenish. This card might be the most narrow entry on our list, since it only goes in heavy enchantment decks. It was first printed in Urza's Destiny in 1999, and its power hasn't been matched since. When your deck is filled to the brim with enchantments, all you have to do is play the game, and enchantments will end up in your graveyard. After a board wipe or 2, your graveyard will most likely be so filled with enchantments that resolving a Replenish will be GG. It can return massive amounts of auras for a Voltron kill, or key constellation effects to draw tons of cards, removal to deal with threats, and everything in between. Self-mill makes this card even more potent. There aren't many cards in Magic that reanimate all your key resources for just 4 mana. Number 31, Academy Rector. Hey, our second Urza's Destiny card in a row. When you build around Academy Rector and it dies, you're most likely winning. Omniscience is usually good enough to close most games, especially for 4 mana. Pattern of Rebirth can start any number of combo chains as well, and there's plenty more. It's probably worth noting that Rector can also fetch staples like Necropotence and Rhystic Study, but why bother with those when you can just win? Number 30, Felidar Retreat. 2020 Zendikar Rising brings us yet another card in the top 100. It might seem weird seeing Felidar Retreat above Replenish and Academy Rector, but those cards have much higher restrictions on what decks can play them, and Retreat is good on virtually any board state in almost any deck, though it excels in token and landfall strategies. Light on creatures? Make some 2/2 cats with a fetch land. Plenty of creatures? Also no problem. Just pump them all permanently and attack without fear of crackbacks. Felidar Retreat pumps your team and demands a board wipe, but as long as it's out, building up a board state afterwards is trivial. This card is fantastic. Number 29, Keeper of the Accord. From Commander Legends in 2020, Keeper of the Accord is a card that is only bad if you're far ahead. This card will keep you ramped up with the player who controls the most lands. On top of that, you also get soldiers if another player has more creatures than you, and this can be abused with a sack outlet to get you extra dice triggers. It only slots in white, non-green decks containing more than a few basic planes, but that's really all it ever asks of you before it puts in a serious amount of work. Number 28, Savines Reclamation. This is one of my favorite designs in recent years, coming from Commander 2019. To really get full value out of this card, you want to be pairing it with fetch lands in non-green decks, making this a premium ramp spell. With 2 fetch lands early, you can chain turn 3 Reclamation into turn 4 Flashback, giving you 7 lands on turn 4, 2 of which are untapped. Though the main mode may be ramp, this card also scales very well with the game because as ramp becomes less useful, you can target non-land permanents for excellent recursion. Having flashback means this card even works well with self-mill. This is the best white ramp spell, period. Number 27, Blind Obedience. Lots of cards cause creatures to enter tapped, but not many extend that ability to artifacts, which helps push Blindo from medium to great. Ever since Gatecrasher's release in 2013, Commander players have been set full turns behind when their mana rocks enter tapped because of Blind Obedience. This card is also by far the best way to utilize the Extort mechanic, which scales amazingly in multiplayer and helps offset some of the backlash you'll get from reminding everyone that most of their cards enter tapped. Number 26, Solitude. This is the first card originating from Modern Horizons 2 in 2021 to crack this list, and it sits all the way up at 26. Solitude is Swords to Plowshares on a body, which ends up playing out very nicely. In a pinch, you can pitch a card and cast 0 mana Swords to Plowshares, which could be an absolute blowout. Where this card really shines is in Flicker decks, because you can get the ETB trigger multiple times, even after evoking it. Flickering this card in response to the evoke will exile the 2 biggest threats on the board and leave you with a 3/2 lifelinker. Just make sure you play enough white cards to reliably cast this for 0 when you really need to. And it's time for the top 25. We're really getting into the best of the best now. Number 25, Dismantling Wave. 2020 was certainly the year of Commander, with Dismantling Wave being one of the best cards to come out of the Commander precons that year. At face value, it's literally just a 3 mana 3-for-1, assuming each opponent has something, which is usually a good bet. That's already amazing, but you can also pay 8 mana to wipe all artifacts and enchantments and draw a card, without fear of this getting countered. Dismantling Wave slices and dices and practically never disappoints. This is one of the go-to removal spells in white. Number 24, Luminous Broodmoth. Ikoria from 2020 contains the first and only Godzilla character to crack this list. Mothra provides all your creatures with a second life. As a fair card, it doubles all of your enters the battlefield and dies triggers, insulates you against board wipes, and also grants evasion to all your creatures that die. On top of all the amazing fair things the card does, it's also part of a 2-card combo with Solemnity, which can be paid off by Altar of Dementia or Blasting Station, among other options. Luminous Broodmoth really does it all for creature-based decks, and can be one of your premier threats. Number 23, Esper Sentinel. Nicknamed Rhystic Buddy due to its loose similarity to the card Rhystic Study, Esper Sentinel is our second entry for Modern Horizons 2 in 2021. For only 1 mana, this card will be taxing opponents once per turn, and if they don't have the extra mana laying around, they'll often just let you draw as opposed to skip their play. If you can augment its power with counters, auras, or equipment, the tax quickly becomes too much to pay, leading to even more card draw. It really shines in creature decks that can cantrip off of it or find it easily, since your 1 mana investment turns into a mild headache for everyone else and can often net you cards. Esper Sentinel also falls into the removal's sweet spot. Annoying, but usually not annoying enough to spend an entire removal spell on. Number 22, Catastrophe. This card, much like Cataclysm, is pseudo-banned due to the hate for mass land destruction in Commander. This one comes from 1998's Urza's Saga. Both modes on this card are a bit overcosted since you can get either half for 4 mana. However, this is a card that is almost never dead. If you're ahead on board, wipe out all the lands and dominate the rest of the game. If you're behind on board, destroy all creatures and play catch-up from there. As with a lot of cards on this list, versatility is key. It might not be nice, but Catastrophe is one of the best board wipes in white. Number 21, Weathered Wayfarer. Landing just shy of our top 20 is another efficient white 1-drop from Onslaught released in 2002. As long as this card is on the field, you'll never miss a land drop again, and each land drop becomes your best land. Some of the best targets for Weathered Wayfarer to fetch are Gaia's Cradle, Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, Cabal Coffers, Sarah's Sanctum, Ancient Tomb, and my personal favorite, Field of the Dead. Every single new land that gets printed makes this card a little bit better, so in 2 years, maybe this will climb to number 20. But until then, Number 20, Selfless Spirit. This is the second 2/1 spirit for 1 and a white that has flying and sacrifices for an effect on this list. This one's from 2016's Eldritch Moon. This is obviously the better of the two because it's higher on the list. Selfless Spirit acts as onboard board wipe protection. Often, it will function as a flag bearer effect, forcing the first removal spell to be aimed at it, because you'll be able to save the rest of your board with its ability. Selfless Spirit can also be sacrificed proactively to attack with little consequence or turn a board wipe into a Plague Wind. It's an all-around efficiently costed powerhouse that also pairs extremely well with number 19, Sun Titan. In 2010, we got the draft-ruining cycle of Titans from M11. We all know Grave Titan is the worst member of this cycle, but Sun Titan is the best legal member. This is an incredible value engine for any white deck. Sometimes it will just get back a fetch land, and that still feels pretty good because he'll do it again every turn while smacking in for 6. Now, a 6-mana value engine alone is decent, but at number 19 of all white cards, we need a bit more, and we get that in the form of combo potential. Pair Sun Titan with Safi and a sack outlet for infinite ETBs, or Fiend Hunter and a sack outlet for the same benefit, or even random critical mass combos that just fall into place, like Sack Outlet, Haste Enabler, Double Soul Sisters, and Priest of Fell Rites. Sun Titan generates value and creates combos and is here to top any curve with style. Number 18, Emiria's Call. Alright, this is the last Zendikar Rising MDFC, I promise. As it happens, it's also the best, by a lot. This is part of the Mythic cycle that completely negates the main downside of MDFC lands, entering tapped. You can just pay 3 life for an untapped white land. The spell on the front side is just okay, 7 mana for 2 4/4 angels is something you'll take maybe 10% of the time, but just to reiterate, again, this isn't in a spell slot, this is taking a land slot. As far as we're concerned, every single 1 or 2 color deck on the planet should be running their respective MDFC Mythic lands as almost literal free rolls. Number 17, Ranger Captain of EOS. This is a slight nod to the card Ranger of EOS, debuting in 2019 with Modern Horizons. Costing only 3 mana is a huge buff to the strength of this card over the original, but in exchange, you only get 1 creature. This exchange would leave the cards pretty even, but the seemingly needlessly tacked on second ability takes this card to a whole nother level. The ability can be used defensively to prevent opponents from playing non-creature spells like board wipes on their own turn, or offensively to protect your combos during your turn. When combined with Recursion, this card can even soft lock certain decks by sacking itself every single turn. Ranger Captain is best friends with Savines Reclamation, Sun Titan, and Luminous Broodmoth. Gee, it's almost like all these white creatures work insanely well together. Number 16, Stoneforge Mystic. From one tutor to another, this one comes from 2010's Worldwake set. It's one of the best equipment tutors out there, and it also lets you cheat mana and avoid counter magic with the activated ability. Some of your best targets include Skull Clamp, the Sword of cycle, Sword of the Animist, Shadow Spear, Lightning Greaves, and Blackblade Reforged. Skull Clamp is so good that if it was the only target for Stoneforge to find, Stoneforge might still make this list. But the full package of a blinkable body that finds various powerful equipment and can cheat multiple equipments out at instant speed over the course of the game makes for a fantastic card. Number 15, Heliods Intervention. Yet another card from 2020, the year of Commander, more specifically Theros Beyond Depth. It isn't hard to see why Heliods Intervention is so ridiculously good. It's literally an X for 1 that scales with the game. Early game, go 1 for 1 or snag a 2 for 1. Late game, Plague Wind every artifact and enchantment that matters. It has so much power and versatility already, but there's a whole second mode attached. Granted, on a card by itself, the burst of life gain is garbage, but it's what we here at the Nitpicking Nerds call gravy. In a pinch, this amazing removal spell can also save your life. Absolutely stellar card. Number 14, Sarah Ascendant. This card's templating doesn't work for Commander. When it was released in 2010 and M11, the idea was that if you're 10 life above your starting life total, you get a huge bonus. But with this card's specific wording, it's literally a 1 mana 6/6 flying lifelinker in Commander. If that sounds unfun and dumb, that's because it is. Until this card is answered, it's a 12-point life swing every single turn as soon as turn 2, and it helps fuel its own life requirement so you can't be attacked below 30. And because Sarah Ascendant only costs 1 mana, players will often be losing mana advantage when removing it. This card is as strong as it is annoying, which is really saying something. Number 13, Tragic Arrogance. This has been the Nitpicking Nerds' go-to white board wipe since Magic Origins release in 2015. Similar effects like Single Combat and Cataclysmic Gearhulk let each player choose what to keep, but with Tragic Arrogance, you make all the choices, meaning you get to cultivate the perfect board state for yourself. You'll obviously leave yourself with all your best permanents and leave them with their crappy token and mana rock. Sometimes this card can fail to answer certain specific board states where they either have only 1 threat or the ability to sacrifice permanents, which will ultimately let them make the choice of what to keep. But even with those downsides, Tragic Arrogance is a consistent overperformer well worth its mana cost that will send opponents packing. Number 12, Revelark. Evoke was an incredibly cool mechanic from the Lorwyn block. The second set of the block, Morningtide, released in 2008, gave us one of the coolest Evoke cards of all time in Revelark. It's not only great in Graveyard and Aristocrat decks that can sacrifice it at will, but in Flicker decks as well because it triggers upon leaving the battlefield and not dying. It's an amazing value engine that is impossible to stop without graveyard hate. Revelark also turns opposing board wipes against your opponents, leaving you 2 of your best small creatures when the dust settles. On top of all of that, Revelark is a combo machine. That leaves the battlefield line really opens up a lot of reanimation shenanigans, so much like Sun Titan, this value engine can win you games out of seemingly nowhere. Number 11, Generous Gift. In 2019, Wizards of the Coast decided that Commander players should have another beast with it and color shifted it to white in Modern Horizons. 3 mana is where spot removal starts to really fall out of the realm of playability, unless of course that spell hits any permanent. This is the gold standard for versatility in the removal slot. The downside of this card is basically nothing, as a 3/3 elephant will have little to no impact on the game at all. My co-host Joe Cherries puts this in literally every white deck he plays, and I can't really blame him. Number 10, Recruiter of the Guard. Conspiracy Take the Crown from 2016 gives us yet another creature that ETBs to tutor, but don't worry, this is the last one on the list. Recruiter of the Guard is the white version of Imperial Recruiter, but instead of caring about power, it cares about toughness. Usually to help hammer home how useful these tutors are, I've been listing cards they find, but Recruiter literally gets hundreds of strong commander creatures for dozens of different archetypes. With over 6,000 different targets in the commander format, it's perfect for toolbox decks, reanimator, and blink strategies. Recruiter even grabs 27 cards from this list. Number 9, Elish Norn, Grand Cenobite. She comes from the plane of New Phyrexia, and also the set New Phyrexia from 2011. Elish Norn may be 7 mana, but she is worth every bit, because when she resolves, she demands an answer. She kills all your opponent's creatures with toughness 2 or less when she hits the board, and this is static, so as soon as she resolves, they're gone. She also buffs your team so that pretty much every creature you have, even tiny 1/1s, are now threatening. What used to be your 1/1s trade with what used to be their 5/5s. She's also a great reanimation target. Paying 7 for her is good, so obviously paying less is even better. Number 8. Skyclave Apparition. I bet you thought we were done with Zendikar Rising. Joke's on you! 2020 Zendikar Rising is the most represented set on this list, interestingly enough, with this card being its highest ranked. We mentioned earlier that O-Ring effects are bad, but what makes Skyclave Apparition so good is that killing it won't give your opponents their permanent back. They just get a worthless spirit that doesn't even have flying. Also, Apparition hits any non-land permanent with mana value 4 or less, so it's extremely flexible. Just like everything else with an ETB ability, feel free to blink and recur this as much as you can. Commander is a format friendly to big splashy creatures and spells, but the vast majority of non-land permanents cost 4 or less, making this one heck of a removal spell. Number 7. Humility. Here's another reserve list powerhouse that is underrepresented in decks with respect to its power. This one comes from the 1997 set Tempest. Creatures are a huge part of Commander. In fact, almost every deck is built around a specific one known as the Commander. Once this hits the board, not only will every creature be a worthless 1/1 with no abilities, but all future creatures enter as worthless 1/1s. So those 45 creature toolbox decks will be rendered literally useless until they find one of their several non-creature answers to Humility. The game will slow to a complete halt once this resolves, as attacking will be next to pointless. Control and Stacks decks absolutely love this effect, and you can't really get it anywhere else. Number 6. Karmic Guide. This is the only creature that reanimates creatures on ETB with no caveat, period. It's been around since Urza's Legacy in 1999. This card is very similar to both Sun Titan and Revelark in that it's a great standalone card that is pretty much guaranteed to get you value. Also, like those other cards, this one is a combo monster. Revelark and Karmic Guide go infinite with any sack outlet, which is insane considering that both of these cards are highly playable by themselves. Karmic Guide is the best at what it does and is an irreplaceable Commander staple that has ended countless games with its loops. Number 5. Armageddon and Ravages of War. Coming from 93's Alpha and 99's Portal 3 Kingdoms respectively, these cards are the best of the best when it comes to mass land destruction. As covered before, these cards are quote-unquote soft banned, so don't expect to see too many at Commander tables. But that doesn't make them any less powerful. These are 2 of the best spells you can cast when you're ahead on board, as they will slow the game way down and give you full control over everything. Nobody else will have resources to contest your board state and threats. Combine either of these with a way to return or protect your lands, and the game will practically end on the spot. Number 4. Enlightened Tutor. In 1996, Mirage was released, and with it came an incredibly strong cycle of tutors. Enlightened Tutor is so good that despite it being card disadvantage and almost $40, it's still the 4th most played white card in Commander according to EDH Rec. Once you have a solid 5 to 10 targets in a deck, you can just throw this in and be happy with it. This works as a surprise tutor on someone's end step, on your upkeep, or in response to card draw. Plus, it can grab Soul Ring or Mana Crypt early to give you an unfair resource advantage right away. 1 mana instant speed tutors are busted. Enough said. Number 3. Swords to Plowshares. Dating all the way back to Alpha in 1993, Swords is, to this day, the best creature removal spell ever printed, full stop. It only costs 1 mana, it's an instant, and it exiles instead of destroys. All this upside comes at the measly cost of handing a player a couple life, which is utterly useless to them 95% of the time. Swords is pretty much an auto-include in every white deck regardless of how many other colors you're playing. Number 2. Teferi's Protection. Teferi's Protection protects you from pretty much anything your opponents can throw at you and all but guarantees you're going to see your next turn. You can use it in response to a board wipe, lethal attack, spot removal, or pretty much anything you don't like. And yes, this includes a player looking at you the wrong way. When combined with mass land destruction, it's pretty much a 2-card victory. The safety provided by Teferi's Protection cannot be understated. This card is truly a Commander staple, but not quite strong enough to top this list. Number 1. Smothering Tithe. Well, here we are at the number 1 white card of all time, and it comes from such a recent set, Ravnica Allegiance of 2019. This is one of those cards that definitely gets groans and eye rolls whenever it's cast. Just one go around the table is 3 triggers minimum, which will result in either 3 treasure, 6 wasted mana, or a combination of the 2. 2 mana is a lot to pay for each draw just to prevent 1 measly treasure from being made. But when this becomes the mentality of the whole table, the Tithe player is going to steal the entire game. The mana advantage provided is just too much to overcome a lot of the time. All in all, this is an irreplaceable white staple that can dominate games by itself and is a great play at any point, and that's why it's our pick for best white card in all of Commander.
That is our list. We are not able to implement Innistrad Midnight Hunt into this list because this video has been months in the making. But Vanquish the Horde would definitely make it somewhere in this top 100 I estimated around number 11 if I had to throw it in, but we haven't played with the card and we did not want to just throw it in haphazardly.
Yes, and the top 3 was tricky. It was tough to grade those, but we're pretty confident with our final ordering, which was Sword Splashers number 3, number 2, Teferi's Protection, and number 1, Smothering Tithe. Pretty solidly locked into those, at least in our opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Special shout outs to all of our patrons. We love you all as much as you can. You guys make these videos possible, these long form ones where we really take our time and we grind away to get these done. Thank you all for your support.
Yes, and if you want to buy any of these 100 amazing white cards in Commander or Vanquish the Horde as the 101st special edition, go to the TCG Player link in the description, click the cards you're going to buy, put them in your cart, check out. Because you started with the link, you're supporting small businesses, you're buying cards you were going to buy, and that's great for you, and you're giving a special support to us, courtesy of TCG Player. You spend no extra money.
Sorry, no tippet today, guys. Peace out, Tribe Scout.